welcome back to the OMG MotoGP podcast, your Malaysian Grand Prix preview edition. And of course, I'm Renita Vermeulen and I have Mr. Keith Huewen here. But before we even get into MotoGP, guys, we want to just say on behalf of the whole OMG MotoGP team and send our condolences to everyone in the affected area surrounding Valencia with those terrible floods at the moment. We've seen stuff on social media. Obviously, I'm here in Australia, so I'm only seeing what I can online, but from what I've heard, and even our editor Adrian is from, or his partner's from that area, and hearing the stories firsthand about what's going on in that area, we just send our thoughts and prayers to everyone affected. But Keith, I can't believe that this is happening. We have such a high of MotoGP, the penultimate round. It could go down to the final Grand Prix, and then we see these videos and this footage of what's happening in that area, hearing all the stories about the locals and obviously the circuit being damaged. It has gone from a high to an absolute low.
Yeah, they've had something like a year's worth of rain in 8 hours, and it all came down the hillside. And at the end of the day, the human element is obviously a disaster. And, I think we all feel and understand what's going on out there at the moment. It's big on the news here in the UK. We've had a budget yesterday as well, which is big news here. But obviously, the disaster in Valencia has kind of Valencia region has kind of hit the headlines massively. From a sporting perspective, I can't imagine what it's like from a human perspective, but from a sporting perspective, the road into the circuit has been destroyed. The track, I think, is not in bad order, but they've got a lot of clearing up to do. And again, from a sporting perspective, that must surely fall way down the priority order to sort out the region in the way that they need to from a human perspective. So I wouldn't be surprised if we have a change of venue for the final round of the year, seems that we're almost on top of that. Only 2 rounds left with this one that we're going to preview in a minute. But where would we go? Well, there have been obviously various speculations about having 2 in Malaysia, for instance, but I can't see that as being a viable option when everything is already freighted or already shipped or ready to ship back to Europe. So I can imagine, Spain, Portugal, Iberia as a region, that Iberian Peninsula has huge amount of tracks, good Grand Prix tracks. It's just a case of finding one that's free at an appropriate time for the final round. It's not appropriate to really bring up Valencia as perhaps not being such an appropriate track for the end of season anyway. You know my thoughts on that. But if we went to somewhere like Portimao in Portugal, fantastic racetrack to finish a Grand Prix series on. Catalonia, like at the end of the day, great racetrack just outside Barcelona. Aragon, great racetrack still to finish a Grand Prix series on. So Dorna have options, and being based in Spain, obviously, they're pretty well connected as well. So I don't think it's going to be a problem having a final Grand Prix in Spain. It's just a question of where at the end of the day. But yeah, our wishes and best thoughts go out to everyone in that region, and hopefully, it's already too late for some, but hopefully we will have good news moving forward, and they'll start the big tidy up.
I think you hit the nail on the head there. I saw a post from Marc Marquez saying that I don't even want to think about racing. I'm just thinking about the people who've been affected there. And it seems like the whole MotoGP community is the same at the moment, which is really lovely that they're not so focused on what their job is. They're focused on humanity. And it's refreshing to see that.
Well, it's very Spanish-centric as well, isn't it? Spain have communities. I feel like we've kind of lost that in the UK a little bit here. Be interesting to see what you say about where you are. But I feel like we don't have communities in the UK anymore as such, whereas Spanish people do have communities, their village, their town, their area. They're very, ferocious in supporting their areas and their communities in general. So you can imagine it would hit something like that fairly hard. To my shame, I hardly even know my neighbours where I lived for the last 14 odd years. It's a strange thing here in the UK nowadays. I think we've kind of lost that community spirit to some extent. Although having said that, in a disaster situation, suddenly you find out actually we do have a community and we are all pulling together. but we haven't, thankfully, suffered anything like that in recent times where I live. Look, I mean, at the end of the day, we've got a great community in MotoGP, Moto2, Moto3. That whole 3,000 odd people or whatever it is that move around the world is like a moving town or large village. It's they do look out for each other. They are, and there will be a huge outpouring within the paddock towards Spanish people that come from that region, know people from that region. And we'll wait and see. Dorna will chip in. Dorna as a company, as a Camilo Espeleta and co. They're from the south, I think. They will be doing their bit for the communities that have been troubled by what's happened.
So yes, everyone listening, our thoughts and prayers are going out to you all affected in that area. But let's move on to MotoGP and let's move on to the Malaysian Grand Prix. Now, there is so much hype around this because we have the hashtag the rematch that is just being plastered everywhere on socials at the moment. We've got Vamos, Jorge, or Forza Pecco. The title fight is on, but we're in Malaysia. We're at a track, Keith, that has 2 really long straights, some hard braking, some fast corners, and it's a super wide track. So tell me, what is it that makes this track, or how do you make the ultimate lap of the Sepang circuit?
Wow. Sepang is really several tracks when it comes to the weather. Depends entirely on the weather here. It's always going to be hot. It's known as the Sweat Olympics. The humidity is high as hell. Everybody's sweating their whatsits off all day long, every single day. And it's who's prepped for that and who's got the setup. I mean, it's interesting to see that the Magnaia has been saying things along the lines of, we know what we got wrong last Saturday. We should be able to. So it's slightly negative tone to that side of the championship challenge. And on the other side of it, the Jorge Martin challenge is that last year he was nervous, he was tense during the last parts of the year, whereas he feels much more confident now, much more prepared for what's ahead in the final 2 rounds. Then you've got the spoiler situation. Bastianini here was a winner here last year. Pecco Bagnaia, by the way, holds the outright circuit record here. So he knows his way around this racetrack. Bastianini is a winner there. So you've got a couple of Ducatis that... Will Bastianini help? Will Bastianini get involved in this title fight? I don't think he will. He's off somewhere else. I don't think there can be any team orders because I think he'll ignore them. Go back to the Rossi-Lorenzo pairing, if you like. Will there be any help from my teammate? Will there hell be any help from my teammate? It ain't going to happen. So I don't think it's going to happen this year either. Of course, you've got the spoilers of Marc Marquez getting involved because he's just doing it for himself and doing it for Gresini on this situation. So Marc too is a threat around this place. So you've got real spoilers that can make this championship or break this championship. And it's going to be, Friday. I'm going to be watching Friday. That is where the key comes. When you turn up at a racetrack, you've got your bike set, your default setting for that bike based on what you had last year, and in Marc Marquez's case, all the data for a 23 bike is there in front of them. For a 24 bike, it's based on, testing and bits and pieces from earlier on in the year. So they might be just a little bit on the back foot. We'll see when they get to this, who gets their bike dialed in the earliest, whether their default setting works straight away on a Friday. There's nothing better than turning up a racetrack and your bike actually works. You chuck your leg over it and you think, I've just got to make an adjustment on the front, a little bit on the back. I've got to change this, change that, change my style of fraction to suit it. Just tiny little changes that make the difference. And there's the other guy that turns up, the motorbike don't work at all, front's pushing, back's hanging out, all wheel spin everywhere. And they've got tons of work to do with a time scale that's too short. You've just not got enough time to get everything done, to work your way through a program. And the other thing is as well with bikes, we're looking for thousandths of a second now. We're not looking for seconds anymore like there used to be years ago. You're looking for thousands. And you alter a motorbike a little bit on the front, it makes a miles difference on the back. If you shift something from the back, it moves to the front. Whatever you do, it has an equal and opposite effect somewhere else in the setup. So trying to find that sweet spot is actually quite tricky. They're obviously all skilled. At this time of the year, they're all dialed in. Everybody's red hot, and they're all dialed into whatever they might need. So the hope is they both land on a bike on Friday that Jorge Martin's bike works perfectly and Pecco Bagnaio's bike works perfect, and we've got a dogfight to the final round. That's how I want it to be, anyway.
I was just thinking when you're talking then about the track, and then you mentioned Andrea Iannone, and I wanted to ask you, tyres at this circuit, is this somewhere where Andrea could be strong because he is that master of managing the tyres?
I think that the tyres, to a degree or not, are important all the way through. It doesn't matter what track you're at. If you've got tyres that are working better than somebody else's at the end of a race, then yeah, it's just a question of who's interfered with the race. I mean, this again is those first couple of corners here can make or break. Look at Marc Marquez last year. Marquez was fast, dumped it in the sprint, I think, didn't he? I think he ended up the road in the sprint. Yeah, he did on lap 1.
Yeah.
And it can cause, that first corner, that first couple of corners, you make a mistake there, get shoved out onto the tarmac, and you're in trouble. And we saw it from Martin last weekend in Thailand. He made a mess of turn 1 because you can win or lose a race on the opening lap nowadays. If you can get that opening lap and get out front in the cool air, what there is of it, then that is an advantage. So everyone's going to be looking for that in that first couple of corners. And the likes of Marc Marquez, the opportunist, he'll be, wherever he's qualified, he'll be ramming it up the inside or riding around the outside at turn 1 and 2.
How do you think Pecco Bagnaia is feeling? I know that you've said that he's the comments that he's made, but Malaysia being the track where you mentioned before the weather, 4 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, they're going to get a thunderstorm, right? It's that part of the world. How do you think he's feeling going into a circuit where he can't be in control of everything, like the weather, for example?
I think Pecco has always been, well, he's grown to be absolutely under control mentally. I think what surprised us, perhaps to an extent, is how Jorge Martin has matured in this last year to be a really serious challenger. The way he's ridden the last, the amount of second places he's taken this year rather than try to win it and crash. He should have crashed last week in Thailand. Marc Marquez fell down, and Jorge Martin behind him had exactly the same crash that didn't happen, and then he backed off. He took second place. He was able to see the error of his ways. Fortunately, stayed on and kept his championship where he needed it to be. And he's got to do more of that over the final couple of rounds. It's going to be spoilers, and it's going to be about accidents at the end of the day. Pecco, to be honest, he can't afford to lay off this. He's got to go flat out. He's got to stick it in as hard as he possibly can. And if it all goes pear-shaped, then so be it for this year. Jorge Martin may end up being the champion. It's a really difficult one to call. And I can't. You're right about the weather. We're talking about track temperature up in the 50s, maybe 60s it can be. I mean, that destroys tyres. Absolutely. I mean, on the edge of the tyre, parts of this track, they are going to be going through the roof scale-wise. And it will make a difference. So Bastianini might well be able to keep it together and take another win there. I mean, he's certainly on the right kind of form at the moment, isn't he?
Oh, 100%. I mean, I don't see why he wouldn't. And reading articles and whatnot online, like you said, he doesn't really want to play into this whole team orders. I don't think we're going to see a mapping 8 come up on the screen this weekend. But
Multi-21.
Yeah, well.
If we're talking Formula 1 for the benefit of Harry.
It's funny when I think back to Sepang, it's hard to not think of 2015 and Valentino Rossi, Marc Marquez, and looking back at like the championships that have gone on to that final round. I feel like 2015 is like a big one for me that really sticks out. And then I think about Andrea Iannone, like you just said, and I think about Marc Marquez. It's hard to not want to see them maybe step back and let the other two fight, but they're races, right? So they're just going to be going for it if they have the opportunity. Because even looking at the results, I think Alex Marquez was on the podium or won the sprint here last year. So it was odd people that are always up the front here in Malaysia. So could we see maybe Jorge and Pecco further back down and maybe some other rider at the front? What like a Brad Binder, for example?
Well, it's missing the vitriol, it's missing the hatred and the aggravation of Malaysia 2015, like you're saying. I mean, the Marquez and Valentino Rossi thing was building through the year, and just came to a head in Malaysia 2015. So there could easily be the coming together like those two had, but there isn't quite the intention that I think there was between both riders back in that particular time. I mean, I likened it at the time, when we were broadcasting, was that Valentino Rossi chucked the grenade and then it rolled right underneath him. It rolled back straight under his feet and blew up in his face. And that's basically what happened back then. We haven't got that situation now. We may well have it next year when Mark and Pecco are in the same team. We'll wait and see how that all manages. I think it's just a straight dogfight. I think it's just a case of each one of these guys is going to be focused on their own game. As soon as they start looking at the other riders, as soon as they start looking and letting them guys and their performances get in their head, that's when you have a problem. The only thing you can do is focus on what you're doing, what your team's doing, what your motorcycle's doing, and keep your head straight. I mean, this time of the year, there's so many things, washing around that you've got to put to the back of your mind. Your management has got to be on top of you. Your dietitian's got to be. Even eating is difficult when the pressure is as high as it is at the moment. The whole thing, sleeping. You can, somebody banging the hotel room door or something in the middle of the night that wakes you up, and then you can't sleep for the next couple of hours. You lay on your bed sometimes, unable to sleep, and you try to. Okay, I can't sleep. I know I can't sleep. My head won't sleep, but I'm going to let my body relax. You talk to your body to lay still, so you're not using up energy in your body. It's your mind is racing at 300 mile an hour, but your body, you try to, and you lay there for hours, just trying to make sure your fingers and your toes and your tension in your body sleeps away, so that you are in reasonable condition come race day. And what you got to remember as well, I mean, Sunday is a bloody hard day, and you've already done 2 days of bloody hard work. You start off on a Friday, and okay, you come in, you've done the press conference on a Thursday, and you're trying to get control of yourself, and everything's going quite good, and then Friday comes, and you work quite hard on Friday, and it's mentally debilitating to some extent. Then you've got Saturday qualifying, which is a real dogfight, and then the day you've got to peak is the day you're the most worn out. You've suddenly got to do your best work on a day that you're feeling probably physically most drained. And if you've had a trip up the road and banged the odd elbow or whatever it might be as well, you've got that to get over. So there's quite a lot of management that goes on in both your head and your physique to get to that point. And I would say Pecco is particularly good at that, although I think we've seen an exposure this year of Pecco's tension back in the end. You've seen him get off the bike and go back into his pit box and sit back for a while with his wife and just try and bring that level of tension down. And I think that it's been apparent that Pecco has not been quite as cool as we've seen him be before. And that is going to be to his detriment in this environment, over this weekend, I think.
In other news this weekend, we have someone returning to MotoGP, Mr. Andrea Iannone. I just want to say I hope that he stays away from the steakhouses in Malaysia this year.
Yeah, no maggots in your steak, that's for sure. That was Argentina where he got that, I think, as well. You're talking about the oh yeah.
Yeah, the steroids in his meat.
The rather steroidal interference with some of the meat that he was eating. That was the excuse, wasn't it? One that nobody believed at the end of the day, so it didn't really matter. He got his ban anyhow. I wasn't going to bring that up, but seeing as you did.
I just have to say, it just makes me laugh that this man, who obviously we know he's good on a motorbike, right? He missed a Malaysian preseason test a few years ago, a long time ago, because his facelift hadn't healed properly. while he was on his ban from MotoGP, he appeared on Dancing with the Stars in Italy. So let's just say he's a man of many talents, and he's come back from his friend Valentino Rossi. He's given him that call. Hey mate, do you want to come back and ride my bike?
Yeah, he's in the Digi's position, isn't he? I mean, I don't want to hype it too much because I don't think anything will happen or two. I would be amazed if he got anywhere near a point scoring position. Yeah, you can't just walk in having ridden World Superbikes this year reasonably well, pretty well. But to walk into MotoGP when everybody's as sharp as a well-honed knife, I don't see it, to be honest. But it's an opportunity. He certainly, in his time at Ducati, was a front runner. And at one point, I thought he would get the factory nod over Dovizioso back in the day. They ended up signing because, unfortunately, Iannone is one of them. He's like a loose cannon. And the fact was that Dovizioso got the job because he was the professor at that time, and he got the job, got his head down and did the job, whereas Iannone probably had more raw talent than Dovizioso back in that time, but you couldn't harness it. And so he's been in the wilderness ever since, really. The doping thing, the drug thing was just ridiculous. There are a lot of people that feel very strongly that he should never have been allowed back. I think he should have got that second chance, personally. That is my view. He's done his penance. Whether he should be in a factory MotoGP ride is another matter when you consider how many other people there are in that long line, that log jam of talent that there is behind. Whether someone else should have been given that opportunity or not, is for other people to decide or comment on. Personally, I think it's an interesting aside for the weekend. I don't think that we're going to see anything great from Iannone. I'd be happy to be wrong. But it's an interesting PR exercise. No, I don't think it's anything bigger than on paper, to be honest. I just can't see anything being, unless he's is he going to be the clown of the weekend? We'll find out when we get to it. But from a performance point of view, I just can't see it happening for him personally.
I think you're right. I think it's a great PR exercise for VR46 to help. I mean, we're talking about it on the podcast where normally, if there's a fill-in rider, you might say, oh, Remy Gardner's coming back for Cal Crutchlow, and then that's it. But I think we're bringing this up. We're talking about it. I see why VR46 have done it over, say, Nicola Bulliger in World Superbikes, who maybe could compete and maybe would score some World Championship points. I don't know, because it's hard when a MotoGP bike is so different to a World Superbike, right? So for these guys to come and jump straight on, obviously when we talk about Remy, he had that experience in previous years, so he kind of has that base knowledge. But same with Iannone, but then for Nicola to come and jump on, you just don't know how long it would take for him to gel. But should the opportunity have been given to somebody else, maybe? It's hard to say. Comment below who you would prefer to be on the VR46. Or if you think that Andrea Iannone is the right choice.
I got more interested in Moto2 because you got Kyrol Idampawi, that's the 26-year-old as he is now, that's joining us in Moto2. Kyrol Idampawi, if you remember, he came into Moto3 when he was like a 17-year-old or whatever it was, and won the second round in the wet. And then went on a bit later on in the year and won in Germany as well, by 11 seconds. I seem to remember. That fits in my head. I'm probably wrong, but anyway. He won by 11 seconds in the wet there. The only reason I'm bringing it up in Moto2 is because he's the kind of guy that could suddenly do so. If it absolutely throws it down with rain, he's the kind of guy that could shock the system. Lucky for Iogura, he's already got the championship won, because they're the kind of wild cards you really don't want in the system. When you're going for a world championship. So Joe Roberts is out, Daniel Munoz is out, Fermin Aldeguer is out of Moto2. But the Kyrol Idampawi is the guy that kind of interests me. Really, that's Alex Marquez. You mentioned him earlier. He's another one that you're right. If we jump between Moto2 and MotoGP, he really could come up with something here. He again has got nothing to lose, and that's the other factor at this time of the year, is who's the guy that's just got an open mind and will go for it. And Alex Marquez could be your man as well this weekend.
Well, let's talk about open minds and let's talk about your predictions for the weekend. But I'm going to throw something on you, Keith. I actually asked ChatGPT what it thought would happen this weekend. And surprise, surprise, it's told me that it's predicted Pecco Bagnaia because he has shown remarkable pace at similar circuits to take pole. For the sprint, ChatGPT has said that Pecco is going to win, aiming to maximize. Brad Binder, it's put as second because he has consistently performed well in sprints, and it said Jorge Martin third. And then for the podium, get this, it is said Pecco Bagnaia. It is said Marco Bezzecchi, and then it's put Maverick Vinales third. So it has also told me that it is gone out for a bold prediction for these. This is ChatGPT. Now, I agree with it on maybe the pole and maybe Pecco being strong in Sunday because we know Pecco's been strong throughout the Sundays this year. But I just thought I'd see what ChatGPT says, and maybe you might agree. Maybe you might not have Maverick Vinales or Marco Bezzecchi on your podium.
Bezzecchi, I might. Bezzecchi, he's good. He goes good round here. Where did he finish here last year? I think he was in the reckoning at one point. I seem to remember, but it's a difficult one. It depends on the weather. I mean, the big variable here is track temperature and how much rain they get and how green the track ends up being after a big wash. You might rubber it in over the first couple of days and get a rainstorm and all that rubber's gone, and that makes a big difference on some of the turns here. But I think Pecco, I had got Pecco in my mind for the main race. It's the usual suspects, really, isn't it? I mean, Bastianini, Pecco, those two, swap them around whichever way you want it. I've got a feeling that the factory Ducati is going to look good. Marc Marquez will be looking good, but that 23 bike is just a little bit steady on pace down those long straights. But he's going to be trying to do it all on the brakes at the end of both of those long straights, where they're tricky corners at the end of both straights. So there's an opportunity there for Marc. But for me, I mean, Binder, he was in my short list. So I'm going to go Bastianini, Pecco, Martin for the sprint. No, I'm not. That's for my main race. Bastianini, Pecco, Martin for the main race. Marc Marquez, Jorge Martin, Pecco Bagnaia for the sprint.
How do you think Pedro Acosta is going to go this weekend? Is it going to be weather dependent for him, or do you think after having that podium last weekend, he's confident?
I was going to say, I don't think it matters for Acosta. I think he is the real deal. He's shown talent even when he hasn't really had much in the way of wet miles on that bike. He rode really, really well in damp conditions. If it's dry, he'll be there or thereabouts. Again, the KTM is not quite the Ducati that it needs to be. Acosta's really, really useful. He's got past that difficult period that he had in the middle of the season. It was a good ride he had in Thailand, bearing in mind he was hurt. And that's a factor. Again, when you are sweating like they will be in Malaysia, physically, this is a very demanding Grand Prix. Thailand is demanding. For some reason, Sepang seems even more demanding. You've got a lot of work to do on a lap around here. So Acosta will be there or thereabouts, but I can't see him challenging the main men. So he will.
So we will. But guys, we want to hear from you as well. So put in the comments below who you think is going to take pole or your podium predictions for this weekend. But I think that just about wraps up our Malaysian Grand Prix preview. If you guys can't get enough OMG, then do check out our socials at OMG MotoGP on all the platforms. Or if you have a question for Keith or the team, you can email us at omgmotogp@gmail.com. But from Keith and myself, we're going to be back real soon with more OMG MotoGP.